Welcome, everybody. For this lecture, we are going to talk about biopsychology as a neuroscience. Now, as many of you know, psychology is the scientific study of behavior, and the neurosciences are the scientific studies of the nervous system. So biopsychology bridges the gap here and looks at the study of the biology of behavior. So it's going to pull a lot of information from the neurosciences, but then focus primarily on the issue of behavior, since it is a field in psychology. So it looks at understanding the brain structures and functions that respond to experiences and generate behavior. Other names for biopsychology could be psychobiology, behavioral biology, or behavioral neuroscience. Biopsychology emerged as a discipline in the late 1940s with the completion of the first biopsychology textbook, which was called The Organization of Behavior, written by Dr. Hebb. And Hebb's work helped discredit the notion that psychological functions were too complex to be derived from physiological activities. So biopsychology utilizes the knowledge and tools of other disciplines of neuroscience. So we have to go over and discuss the different disciplines first, and then we'll look at the different areas within biopsychology. So in the neurosciences, we have neuroanatomy, okay, which is going to focus on the structure of the nervous system. Neurochemistry, which looks at the chemical basis of neural activity, like ionic charges and bonds. And we'll talk a lot about ionic charges in this class. Neuroendocrinology, which is the interaction between the nervous system and the endocrine system, and how hormones are regulated for metabolism and growth and reproduction. It also, another field under neuroscience or discipline is neuropathology, the nervous system disorders or diseases, focusing on maybe seizures, let's say. Neuropharmacology, the effects of drugs on neural activity. So like SSRIs, the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and we'll talk a lot about those. Neurophysiology, functions and activities of the nervous system, like neuronal communication. So now that we've gone over the divisions of neuroscience, now we're going to be focusing on the divisions of biopsychology. Those divisions are physiological psychology, psychopharmacology, neuropsychology, psychophysiology, cognitive neuroscience, and comparative psychology. So each of these has a different approach, but there is much overlap as well. And I want to pause here and mention to you that whenever you see these words, the word that comes at the beginning, okay, is what takes precedence in the field. Okay, so if it's physiological psychology, then the physiology is the most important part, and then the study of behavior is second. Okay, does that make sense? Physiological, so physiology comes first, psychology second. If you're looking at something like psychophysiology, you see how psychology comes first, then physiology, and you'll be able to see the difference in what these people do in just a minute here. Okay, so let's look at the divisions of biopsychology. Physiological psychology, they're going to be looking at neuromechanisms of behavior. They're going to use controlled experiments, primarily in the lab, primarily using pure research here, and they're going to be looking at the direct manipulation of the brain, okay? Because remember, the physiology comes first. Psychopharmacology, controlled experiments of the effects of drugs on the brain and behavior, and we're going to talk a lot about psychopharmacology. Neuropsychology, psychological effects of brain damage in humans, so they focus on that. Usually in a clinical study or clinical area, you'll find a lot of clinical neuropsychologists in hospital settings working with people that post strokes or something like that, okay? Looking at how they can help these individuals post brain damage. Then we get to psychophysiology, which is a relationship between physiological activity and psychological processes. Now, these individuals are using more applied settings, helping people with biofeedback, helping people deal with their PTSD or their muscle tension, things like that. Cognitive neuroscience is the neural basis of cognition, and the focus for cognitive neuroscience is on brain imaging. Okay, so functional brain imaging is the major method of inquiry, but you can also see things like PET scans and so on. And then comparative psychology is comparing different species to understand the evolution, genetics, and adaptiveness of behavior. And they'll also use ethological research, which is the study of animal behavior, to look at the comparisons here. Okay. Now, this table that I put into the presentation is beneficial for you because it brings everything together in one spot. And so, as you'll see in the second column on the right side, examples of how the 6 approaches have pursued the study of memory. Okay, so let's go through that. Physiological psychologists study the contributions of the hippocampus to memory by surgically removing the hippocampus in rats and assessing their ability to perform. Remember what I said, physiological psychologists, their focus is on the physiology, and they're working in a laboratory setting and more peer research. So they're surgically removing the hippocampus, okay? Psychopharmacologists, all right, have tried to improve the memory of Alzheimer's patients by administering drugs that increase the levels of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. So the psychopharmacologists are working on developing newer drugs, right, that affect neurotransmitter groups and so on. Neuropsychologists have shown that patients with alcohol-produced brain damage have particular difficulty in remembering recent events. So these are individuals that are in applied setting, working with people, trying to increase their ability to, like their activities of daily living, okay? Psychophysiologists have shown that familiar faces elicit the usual changes in autonomic nervous system activity. So again, through biofeedback, maybe they're looking at skin conductance, maybe they're looking at electroencephalograms, right, brainwave activity. Even when patients with brain damage report that they do not recognize a face. The cognitive neuroscientists are using brain imaging technology, just like we said, functional MRIs or PET scans, to observe the changes that occur in various parts of the brain while human volunteers perform memory tasks. And then finally, comparative psychologists have shown that species of birds that catch their seeds tend to have big hippocampi, okay, that's just plural for hippocampus, confirming that the hippocampus is involved in memory location. So hopefully that gives you a good example for each division of biopsychology. And the last thing that we want to focus on here is converging operations, okay, which is using multiple approaches to address a single question. So if an individual is injured in some way, then all of these different divisions of neuroscience and divisions of biopsychology come together. They converge together to try to help this individual. Okay? We're going to use the example of Korsakoff syndrome. And here's what we know about Korsakoff syndrome. It is a condition characterized by severe memory loss and most commonly seen in alcoholics. Korsakoff is sometimes seen in malnourished persons who have had little or no alcohol. Thiamine deficient rats exhibit memory deficits. And then alcohol accelerates the development of brain damage in thiamine deficient rats. So you can see here how they might implement brain imaging techniques. They might implement different drugs. So you're dealing with cognitive neuroscience, you're dealing with psychopharmacology. And all of those things are converging together to try to figure out what is happening in the case of Korsakoff syndrome. Okay? So by exploring the possible causes of Korsakoff's using multiple approaches, or converging operations, one is led to more accurate findings. So here's what we know about course cause. Okay? It is the result of thiamine deficiency, but the damage is accelerated by alcohol. And in fact, what's happened here is that these individuals who are long-term alcoholics have replaced their diet with alcohol. So they are no longer consuming a diet that is rich in vitamins. Okay. And so this is what's created this severe thiamine deficiency. Okay. So I'd like to end this lecture with the question that you see here. Can you identify the role in which each discipline of neuroscience and each division of biopsychology may have played in this discovery?